who opened the ticket with them? And who does that person work for? DXC? Okay, so they have a protocol to get support engaged. All right. All right. I'm not. Let me see what I can do.
And now it's like, okay,
All right.
something. I know, last time
Okay.
was awesome.
You good, Joe?
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
So, Joe.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
Joe, you good? You good? All right, let's call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Tuesday, March 15th, 2022 to order. Mary Ellen, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Tedesco?
Here.
Commissioner Volpe? Here. Commissioner Clock? Commissioner Wilowski?
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Caird? Here. Alternate Commissioner Coviello?
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Coles? Alternate Commissioner Ma? Commissioner Santago?
Here.
Vice Chair Selka?
Here.
Chair Hammerson?
Hammersley's here. I did hear from Commissioner Ma and Commissioner Coles, who will not be here tonight, but we do have a quorum. With that, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can all remain standing for a moment of silent reflection, please. Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve our minutes from our last regular meeting on March 1st, 2022.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Locke or Commissioner Clark?
Clock.
I don't know why I
Sue's
do
not
that.
here anymore.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 7, Commissioner discussion. Is there any discussion, any subcommittee reports, anything going on? Commissioner Volpe?
Our meeting's next week. Just a reminder.
Oh, food truck.
Yeah.
Food trucks?
Food truck meeting next week.
Anybody else?
Oh, I'll just announce our next POCD implementation meeting is May 10th at 4 p.m. via Zoom.
Oh, okay. Great. Anyone else?
No.
Seeing none, I'm going to read our rules here. Buckle in. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Southington Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Robert Hammersley. I'm the chair of the commission. I would like to take a few moments to explain the meeting format. Aside from administrative items, tonight's meeting is comprised of 2 parts, a public hearing and a business meeting. During the public hearing, the applicant will present the application to us in detail, which will allow the commission members and the public the opportunity to better understand what is being proposed. The commission members may ask questions during the presentation if needed. Then I will ask members of the public who support or oppose the application to speak. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, come forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address all comments directly to myself and the commission members and not at the applicant or other members of the public. Be advised that this is your opportunity to ask questions and make comments on the application because once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony from the public or the applicant will be permitted. It is important to maintain order and decorum at all times during the meeting. After everyone has had a full opportunity to speak, all questions have been answered and all information has been received, the commission will decide whether it is appropriate to close the hearing, and we will consider voting on the application under the business meeting. During the business meeting, we will deliberate on the applications submitted to the commission and decide how to act on them. The commission may approve the application as submitted, approve it with stipulations, conditions, or modifications, table the action for a future meeting, or in some cases deny the application. 4 affirmative votes of the commission are generally required to approve an application. If you have to leave the meeting before the decision is rendered, you may call the planning department tomorrow afternoon to get the results of tonight's meeting. With that, let's open the public hearing. Item A, I'm not going to read. It's been withdrawn from tonight, so I won't go into reading it, but let's go to item 8B, Southington Water Department special permit application for the construction of a new drinking water treatment building on the existing water treatment site in a residential neighborhood, including all associated utilities, minor grading, and the addition of process driveway. Proposed structure is to assist the existing water treatment building to provide more water to residents. Property located at 177 Dunham Place in our 80 zone, SPU 659. If the applicant is here, if they could step to the podium and just let us know what you're doing, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Tremine from Weston and Sampson, and then I also brought Ben Hipsky from Weston and Sampson. We are working on the project for the Southington Water Department for a new well house and treatment building for Well 10 out on Dunham Place.
Go ahead, Matt. Matt, let's try to keep the meeting moving. Go
Sure,
ahead.
sure. So what we're doing here is we are making a copy of the treatment building number 9. We're moving it probably about 7,500 feet to the side of the site to provide redundancy for drinking water. This well field provides about 60% of the water for the town. The treatment that happens in this building is to disinfect the groundwater that's pumped out of the ground. We add fluoride treatment and then an orthophosphate. Hey, Doug. We add an orthophosphate as well, which helps with pipe corrosion and prevention. And this application is for the building, which is to look a lot like the Well 9 building that's already there. Ben, would you like to go into a little bit about the site layout?
So as you can see here in front of me, I can turn this towards the public after. The site currently exists, the building, there is a generator next to the existing building and a small transformer pad on the same site. It is a processed gravel driveway. The new building will have that processed gravel driveway extended to it to allow for sort of hammerhead parking, allow for vehicles to be parked while delivery trucks are deliver goods. The existing driveway will be refreshed. It'll be brought up to match the new one just to provide an overall more stable site. The frequency of vehicles into the site will not change as an aspect of this being the same as the Well House 9. It'll be the same material delivery because these wells will be working together. You're going to have the same amount of materials going in and out of the site. This is going to not create extra traffic on the road or anything of the sort. Other than that, you see the building. If you can see in the figure here, there is a light green area of this. This is the loading dock. All the lights on the exterior of the building will be located at that loading dock. That means that there will be no lights pointed toward any adjacent property. All the lighting will be over the loading dock or towards existing Well 9. Oh, sorry about that. Hopefully people heard what I was saying still. Yeah, as I was saying, all the lighting will be pointing towards existing Well 9. It means that adjacent properties will not see light coming out of this building. We did receive some comments from people, and I'd just like to address those. One of the neighbors did email the town, and they graciously passed it along to us. One complaint was about noise. Just wanted to, just to confirm with everybody, this building will not produce excess or barely any noise at all when it's in production. The existing amount of noise coming out of Well 9 is very similar to what will be coming out of this new building. Another question was, as far as the tree lines, and as you can see on the figure, there is going to be a good chunk of vegetation between where the clearing, some of which has already taken place, and adjacent property lines. Understanding that it is currently winter and there is a lack of vegetation, that allows for some seeing, hopefully not too much as some people had pointed out. Another question was if this is going to affect, the wells that are on the adjacent properties. It absolutely will not. Matt can go into further detail on that.
So we just completed a diversion permit application with the state of Connecticut DEP, and that required us to do a hydrogeological study of the zone of influence for well 9 and well 10 together, this well field. It was an effort that we actually just received our approval about a month and a half ago. But in that approval, we look at we actually had 30 years of data, groundwater data for this site and monitoring wells that kind of go out at different axes of the well field. So we can monitor long-term the effects of groundwater from pumping at this site. And part of that process as well was to look at public information for well records for neighboring sites, extending into that zone of influence of the well to see the influence of the project on that. What we're proposing with well 10 is not to increase the discharge of water from that well field. It's basically to provide redundancy, and we're not. I think the final limit was 3 million gallons per day of water withdrawal from the well field, which is a lot, but that's not different from the operating. The long-term operations we've had at this site. And then likewise, we also have an annual average number that's 2.3 million gallons per day that we also maintain. And the point of that is to make sure that we don't drain the aquifer because in addition to private wells, we also are concerned about the impacts to wetlands, which we looked at. There was also evaluation by fisheries for Patton Brook. We looked at so many different things. And we also even looked at alternatives to developing this well site further. And there really weren't any really viable, long-term, cost-effective alternatives to continuing use of this site. We can go into way more detail.
I appreciate you letting us know what you have planned, Ben and Matt. So with that, if there are any questions of the applicant for members of the commission, Commissioner Santago.
So no impact to residents' wells.
No. What we found actually is when you call a residential well driller, they're going to install maybe like a 4 or 6 inch case and they typically go down till they hit bedrock. This is actually this aquifer, it's a sand aquifer. So whereas a lot of the residential wells that we're seeing are going down until they're into rock, we're actually pulling from the sand aquifer, which is kind of a surprising thing. We pulled, 35, 40 well records looking at that.
So you're the building guys, right? You're not the water department.
The engineers.
We're the engineer for the water department.
So water department, I can't have the water department and not ask this question. Sure. Will this make my water less hard?
Just before you answer it, just give us your name and serial number. So
Good evening. My name is Doug Arndt. I'm the superintendent of the water department. This is the same exact water that Southington's been drinking for years. Well,
Oh, no.
Oh, no. The hardness is something that comes with well water, and unfortunately, it's a little difficult and costly.
Okay.
And not treated very frequently on our level. Normally, it's treated at the residential
I have to ask because every time I get the water department, I got to ask
get
that
the
question.
same question.
So is this, because I noticed other things on our upcoming agenda, it seems like water department, you have an kind of a big strategic plan about updating wells and updating stations and all that kind of thing. And this is like, bless you, the kind of the first bite at the apple for us this year. So you could kind of talk a little bit about how this fits into everything else you're looking to do.
Well, this well is the cornerstone to our system. 2/3 of the water that the folks drinking in Southington come from well 9.
Wow.
And now will be well 9 and 10. And for years, well 9 has been a primary source of water. But the analogy I like to use, if you ever had a milkshake and you suck too hard, eventually your brain's going to freeze, number one. But number two, it just runs dry. So the harder you suck on something, it limits the life cycle of that well. That's why Matt and Weston and Sampson, our consultant engineers, have been so diligent to try to get this number one, this diversion permit, which secures the Southington's water rights at the quantity that we need to withdraw, but two, to get well 10, a separate well in the same aquifer that allows us to run, instead of well 9 at 100%, run 10 and 9 at 50%, therefore, extending the life cycle, the longevity of the source, reducing the cost to the residents, and, again, securing our water supply.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. I guess
Hope that
I didn't
makes
know
sense.
Yeah. No. Thank you for.
And then in terms of what we're doing, so this is the cornerstone, but we're always looking forward to make improvements. We do have on the books in other areas of town. We do have some manganese, which is a discoloration of water, and we have on the books a planned treatment plant for that in those areas. Probably the next 5 to 10 years if the funding comes into place.
Okay. So this particular thing is a redundant thing. So no noise coming from it, no odor, nothing along those lines for residents.
No, I mean, these aren't large plants. Everything is contained. Everything's inside. And we'd like to think that we're a great neighbor. Our guys get out there, throughout the course of the day, throughout the week, to take readings, as Matt has been describing. And the treatment is just some inconsequential inside of the facility. There's no noise.
Gotcha.
No outside debris or containers or anything of that
How
matter.
long do you anticipate the building project to be?
We hope to have it in by fall, but at this point, with the way the lead times of construction materials go, we're about to go out to bid in the next number of weeks here, and that'll be the real true teller in terms of how much the cost will be, and how long the contractor projects that to go. In terms of the building cycle, I think it was 120 days approximately.
Okay.
So once
Got
they
it.
get,
So it's okay.
once they get going, they get going. I mean, we've been out there developing the well, which is actually installing it, which can be a little bit noisy at times because a lot of heavy steel banging against each other. But beyond that, we'll be hopefully by the fall up and running, and again, all the natural vegetation will come back, into full bloom, and again, things will be very much more quiet over there.
'Cause we did get a letter from a resident you probably saw in regards to hours of building, so that even though it is a wooded area, there are houses there,
That's correct.
and not doing it 6 o'clock in the morning when somebody's trying to sleep, or late at night when somebody's trying to go to bed. So hopefully, good neighbor also means during construction as well.
Yeah, we've been lucky. A lot of times our contractors are local,
Yeah.
whether they're in the surrounding towns, which means that they're not coming from out of state, and the out of staters are the ones that try to extend the early days and late days.
Yeah.
So again, I think normally the folks that like to bid in our projects are some of the best contractors in the state, and are very neighbor friendly as much as they can. I mean, certain times of the year and certain times of things they're doing, there's operations that are noisier than others, but I agree. There's no need to.
Because in this case, it's a town project.
Absolutely.
And so the town needs to be the,
Yep, we're in the same business. I mean, our ratepayers or our customers.
Right.
We treat them like we do with, as much as we can, like family. So
Sure.
we totally understand, and we're, again, other than outside of on things that we can't control, I mean, we really tried to be a good partner and a good neighbor.
great. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for what you do for the water department. We appreciate your
Well,
service.
appreciate everybody else that Planning and Zoning Committee does, and then helping us with the process. Everyone's been great.
Thanks, Doug. Any other questions for members of the commission? Commissioner Tedesco.
So, would you be able to turn that towards, so it's in public view? So, I just have a general question. What makes the additional plant being placed to the southwest of the current one versus just to the south? What makes that more viable, if you could speak to that?
Oh, certainly. So before we went forward to actually cite the location of this building for treatment for well 10, we actually were out at the site. This is going back a few years, and we're doing investigations to try to figure out where would you sink another well for redundancy for number 9. So we looked around the site. We don't want to go too far away from building 9. So in drilling test bores in other areas other areas of the site, we found that the soil going down in this particular location had the least amount of fines when we get down to depth of. So this well 10, which is actually being constructed now, the subsurface part, it's a 36-inch diameter caisson that goes like 110, 115 feet into the ground. That's a lot different than, say, a residential well, which is a small well. But when you have something that big and you're pulling that much water out, any spot you can find where you have the least amount of fines in your sand at that depth is a true benefit. Otherwise, what you're going to do is, as you pull water and you pull the fines, and it plugs up the interface between the well and the soil, and then that's where you have capacity issues, such as over pumping the aquifer.
Right. Yeah. So essentially, construction costs, maintenance costs, that sort of thing, just for the public sort of.
You have to take the well. Well, actually, what happens is if you pick a bad location, you have to take the well offline more often to try to surge it or try to clean up that sediment. So then it actually is more disruptive to the site long term than finding the right location to begin with.
You all said, Nick?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Stalker, go ahead.
We do have
Oh,
updated plan sets which address some of the town review comments. They were actually really small comments,
Yeah,
but
we have.
we brought printed sets too if you needed them. So.
okay.
Just to somewhere, I guess to confirm what you said was that there's no impact on the existing wells for the property owners that are in surrounding the current site.
No, because the total amount of water that we pump out of the ground per day is going to stay the same, and the proximity of these wells is close enough together that they really don't act independently of one another. And the zone of influence in this aquifer itself is a giant area. I mean, at this scale, the piece of paper would stretch probably the size of the room. It's actually a really, really big aquifer. But yes, we have studied that in quite a bit of detail. Yes.
Okay, and the last question is there any screening that would be around this property other than the normal vegetation that's there? Is there any screening planned? Because during the winter, obviously, there is no screening.
Initially, before they had to make room to drill that new well number 10, there were quite a bit more evergreens there, where I could understand if you're a neighbor and you look out back, you feel like you're in Vermont. And then when we had to make space for the work area, that has been cut back. I don't think we maybe anticipated some of the underbrush of those evergreens maybe were a little bare. That's something we can certainly address if it's a concern. I don't know, would you use abrevieties out there or maybe some junipers, but you could do something.
Well, I don't want to specify specifically what,
Yeah.
but I think it would be a good idea if we had some kind of an idea of what kind of screening would be recommended. And we have a tree expert here, an arborer here.
Something deer resistant.
Surprised he hasn't
Yeah.
asked a question yet on that. But, I think screening would be appropriate
Yeah.
around the building itself.
We would, if we did the screening, we actually wouldn't want to go right adjacent to the building because, so with servicing these wells, if you do have to maintain it, say every 10 or 15 years, you actually pull a crane up to the side of the building with the boom, and you actually pull this thing out of the ground. And as you pull it out, you take the sections off. So we can't be, the screening wouldn't be right next to the building, but maybe we can put something
Yeah,
on the
I'm
fence
not,
line, maybe.
exactly.
Yeah.
I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All set, Bob?
I'm set. Thank you.
Commissioner Walowski?
I would just recommend maybe putting some spruce or something off in the distance, not too close, but just something that'll create a nice natural buffer.
Sure.
Spruce.
Spruce.
90% of the state of Maine is covered by vegetation. So when you say Vermont, what you really mean is Maine. But with that, Commissioner Volpe.
So I think my question is a little bit more for the public and something that you were mentioning. So you're already building it right now, not the building itself, but the well. So when is some of that work going to be done?
So for the actual well installation, the contractor, he actually had it's kind of unfortunate. He had his younger brother passed away, so he's been kind of mourning his loss for the last 2 weeks, I think about. But he's supposed to be coming back at the end of this week to ramp up. So the final, okay. So with a well, I don't want to get into all the details. With a well this complexity, you can't just drill a hole and then you stick a pipe and you're done. So he's going to be coming back this weekend, and the rest of the 36-inch caisson with his very large. If you ever see Oak Island, it's like big equipment like that. He's going to be pulling out of the ground, and as he pulls it out, it exposes the second half of the well screen at the bottom of the well. So that's anticipated to be done in the next, I'd say maybe next week or the week after. Once he's done with that, that's the noisy part. Once that part's done, then SB Church comes in and basically they purge the well. They pump out the silty water and try to get to the nice clean sand and all the silt they pull out. So that's a much quieter process because we're just pumping water out.
Goes away
to get things circulating. But I think there might be a little.
I think it was a good choice.
There might be a source of power to run the pump at the bottom, but the noisy part of say guys working 6 a.m. Those days are ending. Yeah.
I appreciate that because I think that's part of some of the concern here. And so addressing that timeline, I think, was important. And I just learned a whole bunch of new things. So thank you so much. I could go into a new business now. Just kidding. Not yours.
That was the summary of it. But
I appreciate I really appreciate your honesty and the specificness of the response, though. Yep. I think we all need that level. So thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Any other questions from members of the commission? Anything to add before we open it up to the public? All right, have a seat. We'll open it up to the public. If there's anyone here to testify in favor of this application, please come forward.
Could we, Mr. Chair, could we move the board?
Yeah, could you, so we could see the public, would you guys mind moving the
board? Thank you.
Why don't you just push it in the back there?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anyone here who would like to testify in opposition to this application, please come forward. All right, I assume you all have nothing else to add?
Go.
There you go. Come on, yeah.
Yep.
Again, just lead with your name and your address, just so we get it on the record, please.
My name is Chris Fusco. I live at 110 Dunham Place. Actually, am neighbors to the O'Neills. We live in those two houses that you can see very plainly right there, right behind the structure that's going to go up. Neither one of us are in opposition to having it built. We just had some concerns, which most of them were addressed. Now, I also spoke with, I believe, Mr. Berkmos at the water department, and he answered a lot of my questions about the noise being minimal, that it's like, not going to take out any more water, that it's going to be a backup for the other well. All understandable. The 6 a.m. thing was addressed. The only other question that I had was maybe for you when you said there's going to be more buildings to come. Is that in that area?
Oh, no.
Okay.
That's system-wide. I think the question was a water department system-wide question.
Okay. Let's you
sorry.
phrase the question to us. We'll give you an opportunity to come up afterwards.
Okay. So that, and then, mostly finally was, as far as the visualness of it, yes, it is winter and you can see more, but even in the summertime, it was plain as day. You could see everybody moving around and working, and it's closer than it seems, and it's definitely more obvious than it seems. So if we could get some screening, that's, I think, one of the major concerns, besides like the noise, which I know obviously construction is going to be noisy, but after that, the way it was explained, it's a hum that happens inside the building that you don't hear outside the building. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, we just would like to restore the forest that was there before, and that's about it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks for taking the time. Anyone else who'd like to testify on this application at this time? Let's have the applicant come back up, and Doug, maybe you can talk about your statement earlier about other things to come, what you meant by that.
Yeah, I believe the way I received the question was, and the way I answered was more of a system-wide, water department, town-wide perspective. At this location, this would be the only and last thing in terms of any major work that we would have there. And certainly, I think the water department would be very open to plantings of any kind to assist the neighbors post-construction.
Doug, can I just piggyback on something that Peter Santago said earlier? Water pressure, any improvement there?
Well, water pressure is something that is varies throughout town, depending on your elevation and distance from our pumping sources. You know, we have various places that you may have two neighborhoods or directly abutting each other, but we have things that are called the pressure releasing valves or regulating valves to adjust water pressure. Folks that are closer to the well sources are going to have higher pressure than others that are farther away. So water pressure is highly subjective based on you know, where you are in town, and to some degree we can adjust, but it's you know, something that
Okay.
varies.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions from members of the commission to the applicant? Applicant, have anything else to add before we look to maybe close it?
Just real quick, one of the things we did with noise attenuation was it is a concrete block unit building instead of just a wood stick frame building. To actually, the walls are 1 foot 9 inches thick, which is a pretty good sound deadener. And then what we made sure that the face of the building that faces the homes that we heard from, we made sure not to put any ventilation openings on that wall. So all the ventilation would be going out the long way, away from the property owners. And then in terms of further expansion at the site, we did include a provision in this new building for a future connection in case regulations change for emerging contaminants in groundwater, such as there's this whole new category called PFAS. The firefighting foam that went into the Farmington River, that's actually a really big problem nationwide. It's in popcorn bags, pizza boxes, Gore-Tex, Teflon pans. So we did make provisions to, if we had to connect into this for a PFAS treatment system, but that's we're talking crystal ball stuff if that ever even happens.
Yeah, good for you guys. That's
Learning a lot
insightful. So, any other questions for the applicant? Is there any reason to keep this public hearing open? Anyone object to closing it?
If
It's
they're
ready
okay.
it's ready for action. Yeah.
You guys are okay?
Any objection to closing it? All right, we'll close the public hearing on that matter. Moving on to item 8C, Denorfia Building and Development LLC petition to change the zone district boundary from R40 to Art Zone. Property located at 570 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike, owned by Cecilia Dokar. Zone change 573. Mr. Judas.
Pizza box.
That's the only note I got.
As Steve prepares his presentation, I'm just going to remind members of the commission and the public, this is for the zone text change. This is not a site plan. You will see a conceptual site plan, which is required by regulation during a zone text change. So the provisions or detail of a site plan will be forthcoming down the road.
Sure to get rid of that.
Christina?
Hit those 3 dots on the side there.
So,
The little triangle, someone said. I trust them. No, like get out of there. Yep,
Right
over
here.
there.
There you go.
Hit that. What does that do? Okay,
I
cool.
feel like my competitor at the moment.
I think that's it. I think that's what we can do there. Oh, there. Yeah, that
There we
triangle.
go.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
It takes a village sometimes, I guess.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks, you.
Yeah, I'm going a little too far here.
All right, sorry about that. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. For the record, my name is Stephen Judas with the office of Harry Cole & Son, located at 876 South Main Street in Plantsville. I'm here tonight with Anthony Denorfia from A. Denorfia. How's this? All right. I got to get this right in my mouth. So again, my name is Stephen Judas. I'm with the office of Harry Cole & Son, 876 South Main Street in Plantsville. I'm here tonight with Tony Denorfia of AA Denorfia and Building and Development, who has an office downtown. I have a few things I just wanted to submit for the record. I have the notification that was sent out, a copy of the application that we submitted, and then the mailing certifications. So I'll just hand those to. So tonight we're here per section 3-09 of the Stellington zoning regulations for an age-restricted cluster housing zone proposal. This commission, I think, has already approved a couple of these in town, and I think they have been relatively successful. Our property is an 8.7 acre parcel located at 570 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. And it's the residential R40 zone piece of property, which is outlined on this area map right here. This is a copy of your GIS that we've incorporated for our presentation. Currently, the house has one home, has a pool and a garage, and the rest of the site is undeveloped. This property is abutted to the north, to the east and to the south by Blatchley Avenue and Kiefer Lane, and to the west by the Hillcrest Village development. Our topography on this property slopes pretty much from the east to the west. Let's see, and the property is somewhat open in some areas, and then we have a wooded section, which you can see from this aerial image. There is a drainage gully that runs from the outlet of this detention basin as part of the Hillcrest development that runs through the property and is collected off-site on a private piece of property at this location, and then it is piped from this point around this house to another system that runs further west. As I mentioned, the site's partially wooded, partially open. Procedurally for this application, where your regulation requests that we meet with town staff to review our proposal. We did do that with Mary Ellen, Jim Grappone, and Dave LaValle. We went through what we were proposing to do and just kind of got some feedback from them before we submitted this application. We're also required to submit a zone change map identifying the area we're proposing to change to the ARC zone. And we were also required to submit a conceptual site plan with the application. I just want to make it clear that these are the first steps of this process. If the commission were to act favorably on this application for a zone change, our next steps would be to submit a special permit application, which would require additional notifications of the abutting property owners and another public hearing, and also a site plan application, which would get into the details of the site, the grading, storm drainage, and so on. I'm trying. So I just wanted to talk briefly about let me just go over, we'll get to our zone change map. This is the zone change map that we prepared. As you can see, this is our parcel with the crosshatch in it. This is the Hillcrest property. And then this is Blatchley Ave. Our property is in our 40 zone, and Blatchley Ave is in our 2025 zone. Section 3-09.2 talks about the purpose of this regulation and the reason that the commission adopted this regulation. Just to hit a couple of the reasons and the purpose of this regulation really was to increase the types of available housing with emphasis on private development, common interest communities targeted to empty nesters and seniors, to provide landowners with a land use option on suitably located land with necessary utilities, access, and other important attributes, to create high quality developments capable of sustaining long-term value, and to promote project designs that enhance and protect open spaces, natural resources, natural features, and other elements of the town's character, and also to achieve goals and objectives of the town's plan of conservation and development, providing housing options for an aging population. I think those are the main reasons that this regulation was kind of created, and we believe that our application falls into those areas. So Section 3-09 permits single-family detached residential housing units along with limited accessory uses. The critical numbers are that one individual that lives in the home has to be 55 years or older. They may have a spouse or other occupant who must be 18 years or older. There's some other things about ownership interest, but there's certain specifics about the applicants who live in the house, who own the house, and things like that. It's pretty specific as to how the housing is going to be managed and who's going to live in the property. There's also a workforce housing provision as part of this regulation. The regulation requires 10% of all the dwelling units to be considered workforce housing units, and there's a process that we'll need to go through. Workforce housing units shall be sold or rented only to eligible households, and there should be an incentive housing restrictions as part of that. There's a formula that we'll need to go through once we get into that process as part of our special permit. We would submit an affordability plan and so on to back up the units, the costs, and what they would be available for. Our site requirements per the regulation requires a minimum of 5 acres of contiguous land. We're required to have 75 feet of direct access to a public street, and we're required to have public sewer and public water service for this type of proposal. The intent of the RxZ is to provide sufficient flexibility in design standards in order to achieve important public objectives. And that's kind of right out of your regulation. Another requirement is a 20% green space to be protected through conservation easements in perpetuity. So part of our application will incorporate 20% green space as we go forward. This is our conceptual site plan, and as I bring up the 20% green space, I want to make sure there's no confusion. The dark green is our green space area around the perimeter, and then we have two green spaces in the center of the site. There's a list of items that the green space is going to satisfy the intent of the green space. I won't list all of them, but providing natural screening, buffers from adjacent streets, protecting landscapes, elements important to the community character, trees, stone walls, and things like that, outcrops or other features that we're looking to protect with our proposed green space. Also, part of our application will include existing landscape buffers. A project entry is a requirement. They want to see, we're looking for a streetscape with this type of development. We'll have a nice ground sign. We'll have a pull-off area for mail service, things like that. And decorative and low-intensity lighting is a requirement for this type of application. Our proposed conceptual layout that I have on the board now proposes to cut the existing house, pool, and garage into a separate R40, 40,000 square foot lot, which is outlined here. And that would be just a separate part of this separate division, which would leave us 7.8 acres remaining on the parcel. We're proposing 24 single-family, age-restricted detached units. As I mentioned, our green space is the dark area, and the requirement is 20%. We're proposing 30%, which is about 2.34 acres. The light green area, we took a look just quick to throw some numbers, and we figured the areas around each home. We didn't count all of it, but we figured there's about 25% additional lawn area and so on around each house, which makes up about 2 additional acres of, I would call it green. I don't know if I would call it green space. We have a proposed private driveway with 2 little bump outs, just for aesthetic purposes, with a cul-de-sac with a little island in the middle of that, a green area in the middle of that cul-de-sac, again, for aesthetic reasons. We have a proposed stormwater management facility, which is this location. And as required, 10% of these units would be considered affordable. Of course, we will incorporate all the other site requirements that are necessary as part of the ARC zone into this plan if we are able to move forward. Some of the statistics for this proposal, as I mentioned, it's 7.8 acres. Requires a minimum of 5 acres for this type of use, where we have a 7.8 acres. The regulation permits 5 units per acre, which would allow a maximum unit count of 38 units on this site. We're proposing 24 units. There's a whole set of bulk standards regarding height, setbacks, and so on that we will comply with as we move forward. Some of the other key things were impervious coverage. The regulation allows a 50% impervious coverage. Our calculations were going to be around 32%, so we're well below the requirements. Again, I've talked about the green space. 20% is required for green space. That would give us 1.56 acres. Our proposal is 2.34 acres. And as affordable units, we would be required to have 3 affordable units as part of this application. It gets rounded up. This property could be developed a couple other ways. We looked at, as we know, it's an R40 zone. We could propose a 40,000 square foot building lot subdivision with a public road. We didn't necessarily do conceptuals on those. It wasn't part of the requirement, but I just wanted to throw them out there so we know what the other options are. We're probably looking at an 8 to 9 lot layout for something like this with a cul-de-sac. No restrictions, no buffers, and no open space would be required for that subdivision. We could propose an open space preservation subdivision. In this scenario, we're probably in the 10 to 13 building lot scenario layout with a public road and a minimum of 10% open space. Of course, we always try to come in with more, but that would be the minimum requirement. And there are other types of developments, but those are the two other that I think that the Dorford development would be considering. So I did want to have Mr. Denorfia talk a little bit about the units that he's proposing. We have some layouts here for the types of units. Tony, do you want to get up and talk a little? Okay. These units, I believe, are in the 15 to 1,800 square foot. And these are units that Denorfia has built in other communities. They all will have a first floor master bedroom and attached garage. It's nice when we can kind of give you pictures of the actual units instead of just renderings. So these are actually constructed homes, and these are the 4 units that we're looking at to construct here. This last layout is just kind of gives you an idea of our development in relation to the housing and unit density along Blatchley and Kiefer and on the Hillcrest subdivision. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, why we're presenting this. We think that Section 3.9 kind of was adopted to provide diverse housing options in the town. We've already had 2 or 3 successful ARCs that I think have been constructed or under construction in town. They've worked very well. We believe there's a clear and present need for this type of housing in the town of Southington. And the ARC zone, we believe, is a very good transition between the Kiefer and Hillcrest properties and the Kiefer and Blatchley Ave properties and the Hillcrest property to the east. If we look at units per acre on Blatchley and Kiefer, we're in the 2.3 unit per acre based on the existing development in this area. And then if we look at Hillcrest, we're at 3.8 units per acre with relatively small building lots. And we fall right in between those. We fall in about 3.1 units per acre, which is a good transition from one to the other. And we think that that's a positive thing. Our application also proposes, I mentioned, more green space than required. We're at 2.34 acres proposed compared to 1.56 required. This application proposes far fewer units than allowed, 24 units proposed compared to 38. If we really wanted to try and jam more units in this, that would be the maximum we could construct. Our proposal meets or exceeds the requirements set forth in section 3-09.7, which is all the bulk requirements as far as setbacks, heights, impervious surfaces, and so on. And this application would be a privately owned or privately owned by the property owners and privately maintained, I guess, is more important. There wouldn't be any public improvements that the town of Southington or the taxpayers of the town would have to maintain without any roads, any drainage systems, or anything like that. It would all be self-contained and taken care of by the property owners. Also, I know no one likes to say it out loud, but there shouldn't be any school-age children at this proposal as well. We know that that's something that sometimes comes up and can be a concern for the school system. Another benefit of this proposal is it incorporates workforce housing. I can never seem to get that straight, and helps kind of diversify the housing stock in Southington. And it protects open space through the green areas. Your regulation has these green areas, and those would be protected through conservation easements on the land records that would never go away. They'd always remain green spaces. As I end my presentation, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, we did get a few letters from abutting property owners. From one of the letters, I kind of got the feeling that there was a question as to whether this application might be to determine whether this property got developed or not. And I think that this commission knows that it's a viable piece of property and it will be developed at some point. It wouldn't remain an open space piece of property. I want to point out again that this commission does have the ability, as we move forward, if you were to act favorably, to review this again through the special permit process. We'll have another notification, another public hearing, and site plans will also be submitted during that process. Most importantly, though, this project meets the criteria of 3-09.2 that I mentioned earlier, increasing the types of available housing, providing landowners with options for suitable land, create a high quality development, which Mr. Denorfia does construct, and promotes a design that enhances and protects open spaces. So that concludes my presentation. I don't know if Mr. Denorfia wants to add anything. He taught me everything I know, so I'm sure I missed something he wants to throw in there. But
let's let the teacher talk then.
Yes.
Yeah, why do we have you that?
He likes to make me work.
Oh, God. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Tony Denorfia. I'm a principal of the applicant offices of 133 Main Street, Southington. And I think the first time I saw Steve here, I think he was 19 or 20, and he got thrown to the wolves, and that was quite a few years ago. You even have gray hair now, and I have no hair. But in any event, Steve said most of the things I thought very well that I was thinking about saying, but I just like to hit on a couple of points. One is the units themselves. Again, the units that we plan on constructing are 1,400 to 1,600 square feet, more or less, 2 to 3 bedrooms. They would all have 2 full baths. The typical, well, we build custom cabinets, granite or quartz tops, hardwood throughout, vinyl and masonry siding. The thing is, when you build for this age group, you want to make sure that it's, number one, is high quality, number two, minimum maintenance living. So that's something that we would put throughout this development. There are 2 things that I really think are important with this type of application, and I may have been building for 40 plus years, but when it comes to things like green space, open space, and things like that, that's something that has always been kind of near and dear to me. One of the things that I found, and I built in this town in quarter-acre lots, half-acre lots, 2-acre lots, no acre lots, high-rise buildings, well over 1,000 units in the last 25 years, is that the more land an individual owns, the more he clears. If I build a house for someone with a 2-acre lot, eventually they clear 2 acres. If I build for someone with a quarter-acre lot, they clear a quarter-acre. So when it comes to this idea that bigger lots and things like that save, that's a fallacy, because number one is your impervious area is a lot more. Generally, your homes are like probably in this town, 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. And of course, now people have to get their pools in, their patios, their hardscape and things like that. All of those things wouldn't be here. You'd have your 1,400 square foot footprint, maybe a deck, maybe a small patio, and that's about it. And with the conservation easement, people would be limited from any intrusion and clearing and things like that into that other area. So as far as the green space, I think that's very important, and hopefully, that's something that this commission should look very heavily in the future on other things. The other thing that Southington has been missing for a lot of years is, and I guess I walked in at the end of the presentation that you had today, is the affordability component, which was put into this regulation and which probably will be expanded in the future by this commission. And the affordability component says that at least 10% of the units have to be workforce housing. As Steve mentioned, because we're over 20, that means that we need three workforce housings. And that's defined under this regulation as 80% of the median income. Now, everybody says, well, what is that? Well, in Southington, 80% of the median income for a 2-family household is $65,664. That's not peanuts that's a pretty good income in my thing. If there was a 3-person family, it would be almost $74,000. So the workforce housing are people that either are firemen, are policemen, are town staff, people that are with us and are our neighbors every day. And the price on these for a 3-bedroom unit would be at the end of the year value, the computations would be $290,705. Now, I walked into that conversation just at the end, and you were saying how that how the developer has to look at, they have to supplement this. And when you think about it, they actually do, because these units are going to be valued probably in the low to mid 400s. So you're looking at probably $130,000, $140,000 supplement that, the builder has to give for these houses. So the affordability component, again, we think that's a good social value to the town. I was going to hit on the density and how this is kind of like a transition. Steve already gave you the statistics, but it kind of is. When the Hillcrest development, which was an R40, kind of got, through the court litigation and whatever, the history, kind of got approved into 7,000 to 8,000 square foot lots. That kind of threw the zoning in this area all off kilter. And you look at, to the east, you've got 7,000 to 8,000 square foot lots. To the west, you've got 17,000, 18,000, 19,000 square foot lots, because most of those lots are also non-conforming. And that's in the Blatchley and the Kiefer area, because those were probably built before zoning. They don't meet that. Very few of them meet the 22,500 square foot requirement. So now we've got this piece of property in here, which will get developed because, this is, again, Mrs. Dokars did pass away, and this is out of the estate here. But it will get developed, whether it's by us or by someone else, but it will get developed. And now the question is, what's the best type of housing in this location. And that's why when we sat there and we looked at all the options, we came up with this proposal. Because again, we think there's a good transition between the areas in question. It takes care of a specific need that the town has, and that's this type of housing. As an aside, we presently manage 73 units of over 55 housing in town, and there's never a vacancy, never a vacancies. There are also a couple of other asides on this. When it comes to traffic generation, and I just kind of looked at very briefly the trip generation studies by the Institute of Traffic Engineers. When you have a single family house and you're looking at really peak hour traffic, you have almost one car per day trip during peak hour. When you're talking about an over 55, you're at somewhere around 0.3. Your actual trips per day per household are 30 to 40% of what a single family house is. So is it a little bit, more units? Yes, it's more units, but you have approximately the same amount of traffic, probably less impervious area and less impact on the natural resource of the town. You have open space, which will be committed to open space and which will stay that way, and which will service the needs. So, for those reasons, we hope that you'll be favorable on this application.
Thank you, Mr. D'Onofrio. Any questions from members of the commission to the applicant? Commissioner Santago.
So, hey, Steve. So, for you and just for the public's consumption, whenever we get these things, it's about trade-offs. So, thank you. So, as you know, for the public to know, if you wanted to put an R40 regular subdivision in there, wouldn't even come to us for a vote. Just the site plan would. Go ahead, you have a right to develop the land, have a nice day.
Well, it's considered an as-of-right subdivision, but it would come before you as a subdivision application.
Yeah,
it wouldn't have it would not have a public hearing.
Right. No public hearing would come. Basically, you could go do that.
Yes.
And as you said, that would be 8 to 9 homes,
right,
with a cul-de-sac. And as Mr. D'Onofrio rightly said, you could go border to border.
Yes, sir.
Right? So there'd be no open space, border to border, clear cut. Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Then, as you said, you could do an open space subdivision, which would be a public hearing.
Right.
10 to 13 houses-ish. And we'd get some open space there.
Yep. Yes.
You're coming to us with 24.
Yes.
And 2 acres of open space.
Over 2.3.
2.3. So if we did an open space one, it would be a little over an acre.
Yeah, one. I think I have one. It's in here somewhere.
Sake argument. I mean, I'm not going to to it, right? So instead of 8 to 9 houses and no open space, we get 2.3 acres and you get 24 units.
I think that you're kind of
just comparing.
You can compare it, but I think you have to look at the regulation.
I'm with you. I'm just what are the options that are presented in regards to developing the land?
I think that we also have to remember that what we're proposing in the open space or the green space, we should probably use the proper term because in this application it's green space.
It's green space, right?
Yeah. Again, what we're proposing is more than what's required per the regulation. And the amount of units that we're proposing is less than what's allowed by the regulation.
I get it.
Yep.
But just what the options are and what could happen, because like you said, the land's been sold, it's going to get developed, and so what are the options to go develop it, right? So those are the options that are here.
Right.
Okay. Now, when you do that top topographical about looking at it, you know, when you had your aerial view, if you will,
Yes.
and kind of
I can go
superimposed
back to that.
and you said, well, we could have jammed in 38 units. 24 looks pretty jammed in to me. If I take a look at that, like, holy moly, that looks pretty jammed in to me. I don't, you know, just like, gee whiz.
I think unfortunately the lights are out. You can't see what Hillcrest looks like.
Oh, yeah, but I've been driving. I know about Hillcrest, and it's pretty dense, right?
It's very dense, yes.
Yeah. So I'm not so sure as a transition, this property from Hillcrest to there to Blatchley, is it? I don't necessarily, I have to wrap myself around whether or not 24 units is a good transition to get there.
Would it be better to have another Hillcrest?
Right. Sure. Could do that as well. Sure. So that's kind of mathematically, I'm kind of working myself through it. I guess my question, though, is on the land itself, because topography, so when Hillcrest was built, I mean, there was water issues and there was all sorts of thing about drainage and all that kind of thing. And like you said about basins and all that kind of stuff. So I'd hate to, regardless of what gets developed there, I guess my concerns of the water and sediment and all that kind of thing are going to be there regardless is there. Can you guys talk about how you kind of rationalize all that? Because you know that was there because that happened with Hillcrest. So can you put our mind at ease regardless of what gets there in regards to runoff and water and all that?
Yes. So before we started this process, as I mentioned, we did meet with Mr. Grappone and Mary Ellen, and we had a meeting, and that was one of the major topics of that meeting. There is a detention basin at this location from Hillcrest. There's a gully that runs through here that continued through Hillcrest, and there was a decent amount of water that comes through here, to say it lightly. And Hillcrest proposed 2 detention basins, one at this location and then a larger one over here. I don't know, I haven't had a chance to review the design of that, but I know there's been issues with this detention basin since it was started.
Yeah.
Therefore, a neighbor that we met with on site has received the brunt of that problem. This is something that, you know, obviously I don't take lightly, and Mr. DeNorfy doesn't take lightly. We don't want to ever increase the problem. We want to try and solve problems. And that's from, I've been in this business for 34 years, and I've had problems. You know, we've had to deal with problems, and we don't want to go there. So we talked to the neighbor. She has had another engineering, Cratchit and Jones, looked at some calculations. The town got involved in that. So we've had initial discussions as to where we're going to go with that. We have to address it one way or the other. No matter what happens, we have to address that.
Okay. On your green space, do you see not just the green space, but vegetation buffer between yourself and Blatchley and Hillcrest as well? So can you talk a little bit about the green space and borders? Because like you say, on a regular subdivision, you don't have to do much of anything. And so I wondered what you were thinking in regards to what the green space would look like, as well as buffers between yourself and the other houses.
So what I proposed with the conceptual plan is approximately 2.36 acres of green space, which is the green area around the perimeter. And what we tried to do was leave that protected green space outside of the areas that we think would require construction. This way, any existing vegetation that was there, we could leave. We wouldn't have to clear it. We wouldn't have to grade it. We could just leave it the way it was. As we get into a site plan, I may have to move and adjust things based on grading or drainage structures and things like that. But as you can see, I left some area here out of it because I know I'm going to have to deal with this drainage issue. And I also left this detention basin area out of it. The only thing that we talked about on site was maybe possibly a connection through here. So that green space may adjust depending on the final solution for that area. But this green space is a green space that once it's designated and as a conservation easement, it won't be cut. There will be maintenance. If a tree falls or a tree's dead, they can go in and clear a tree, but it won't. It will stay. It'll stay for our lifetimes. As we get into a conventional subdivision, there's no conservation. The property owners can basically cut what they want. They can they can go up to the property line, as any of the abutting property owners can do with their properties right now. If they want to cut their trees up to this property line, they have the right to do that. And the future owners of a subdivision would have that same right. So our position is that this is better from a conservation perspective. It gives a natural buffer, and there will be additional landscaping within our site. We're required to have street trees, and we propose some green areas in the center that necessarily may not be natural, but would be green areas that we would plant and would be part of that conservation easement.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you, because I like I said, like I said, these things are trade-offs in regards to, because you're asking for a special permit, you're asking for something that's not normally done. And so when we, versus the regular subdivision, what I'll say.
Right, I don't want to say not normal.
Watch my words, right? So in comparison to a regular R40 subdivision versus an open space subdivision versus an art zone, what are the differences? And are the differences, as you say, this would be better, this would be worse, whatever, and you always get more density, but the trade-off with density is space.
Yes. I can tell you that the trade-offs there are many. This process is much more scrutinized, much longer.
Yeah.
There's more involved, property values and so on as we go through the special permit. So each of the methods that I mentioned, the R40 is the simplest way.
Right.
We design a plan, we give it to you. If it meets the requirements, generally you approve it and we move forward.
Yep.
Open space is a little more scrutiny, generally a few more units, a little more open space, still scrutiny through the public hearing process, special permit. And then this is the next step. However, with this, there's also restrictions. Even though we're getting more units, we're restricting these units to 55 plus, where the other two developments, there's no restrictions.
Right.
We're proposing 10% open workforce housing. It's can't get it. With the other applications, we don't have any of that. So there's trade-offs all the way down the road. The road width here is narrower. There's less impervious surface. We're able to do things that aren't on a public street. We have to have curbs. We have to have catch basins. We have to have a lot of infrastructure. On a roadway like this, we can do curbless roads. We can do grass swales, drainage things that are like from a low impact design perspective, which is the direction that development and the DEP wants us to go. They want us to infiltrate and try to get that water that runs through that gully to go into the ground instead of through the surface. So unfortunately, our subdivision regulations don't allow us to incorporate those items. They're difficult for the town to maintain. And so it's just not something that we do. So there's so many different trade-offs. It's hard to quantify all of them.
Right. And we just have to be able, one of this is for public consumption, so they know what the different options would have been.
Correct. I understand.
Because we've talked about it any number of times.
Yes.
But for public consumption, like, okay, what could happen with, check a box versus what could happen with a public hearing versus this. So people, more from an education standpoint, for people to understand what happens.
Yes, and I don't. Again, some of our public is very well versed in our regulations too, so we're not teaching
better
them
than us sometimes.
So I guess there's trade-offs all the way around.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm done for now, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Any additional questions from members of the commission?
Just, I guess, a general question concerning when you talk about age restricted. I think we're pretty familiar with what that term really means. In the houses that you're talking about, since we're talking age restricted, are they handicapped accessible? The units that.
So I believe we're required to have 10%. It's considered handicap adaptable. So 10% of the houses on this site would have larger bathrooms, larger doorways. And then if they needed to install handrails and things like that, that could be done. So it's
not talking this 10%, which is workforce /
no, it has nothing to do with
strictly
affordable.
10% of the 24 would be okay.
I could be off on the 10%.
No, all of these units would be handicap adaptable. It only requires changing your door sizes, having your cabinets be easily adjustable and things like that. Blocking in the wall for your bathrooms for the handicap rails. So all of the units would be handicap adaptable.
Thank you. Thank you.
So all first floor, ranch styles, or primarily a first floor bedroom, so they would all qualify.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the commission? Let's open it up to members of the public. If there's anyone here who would like to testify in favor of this application, please come up to the podium now. Again, just start off by stating your name and your address.
I got this process. Good evening, Ms. Edwards, Director of Planning and Community Development, Jim Grappone, our town engineer, Chair Hammersley, Vice Chair Salka, distinguished commissioners, neighbors, and friends. My name is Mary Ellen Hobson. I'm the property owner at 113 Blatchley Avenue and a abutter to 570 Meriden Waterbury Road. I've lived in Southington nearly all of my life, probably taught some of your kids to swim at Camp Sloper. I owned 113 Blatchley Avenue since 1994, nearly 28 years. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm very committed to the health of the citizens and the environment of the town of Southington and beyond. Standing before this commission is kind of deja vu. Many of the folks who are here tonight remember public hearings to change the zoning laws for the Ruey Lane development just south of Blatchley Avenue from an R40 to an R2025 in the 2000s. Folks also remember many meetings and public hearings over the Hillcrest development, originally at 508 and 544 Meriden Waterbury Road. That property was zoned R40 also. First, 28 or so single-family houses were proposed on that 32-acre site. Then 210 condominium town-style houses were proposed. A mixed-income development was eventually proposed in order to create a housing opportunity district with a percentage of affordable homes. The outcome, after much ado and a lawsuit, was the current about 100 homes, R2025, mostly quarter-acre lots at biggest, I believe, Hillcrest development. During many of the Hillcrest public hearings, I spoke about concerns related to the Hillcrest development, including pesticide-contaminated soil from the former orchard, traffic concerns, loss of animal and bird habitat, which affect the public health, loss of old-growth hardwood trees, which also affect our oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, light pollution, pesticide and lawn chemical runoff to the Quinnipiac, which also affects our health, and most important to me and my property was stormwater runoff. My property is now the low spot for much of the drainage that comes out of the former Doran's Orchard, or now Hillcrest, or off the Meriden Waterbury, 570 Meriden Waterbury Road. The stormwater management for Hillcrest supposedly ensured zero increase in runoff. That's zero in the engineering terms, okay? Well, that turned out not to be true. My yard was inundated with brown, silty water, my grass destroyed in parts. My basement was violated several times with brown silt-filled water. Even though my house is located in a FEMA-designated flood zone, insurance does not cover flood damage unless FEMA declares an actual flood in that area. The most severe flooding for me was in the winter of 2009 when 3 inches of water filled my entire basement, lapping at my furnace.
No, let's one person at a time. One person at a time. Go ahead, Ms. Hobson. Ms. Hobson.
I'm finishing,
Ms.
Mayor.
Hobson. Ms. Hobson.
Thank you.
Here.
Thank you.
Please. Thank you.
Filled my basement. An entire truckload of sand was dumped in front of my garage door to a height of 3 to 4 feet high, 8 feet wide, and 6 feet deep to prevent further flooding. I lived with that sand pile in front of my garage for over a year. After hiring an engineer and a lot of hard work by many folks, the resolution of the increased stormwater runoff was to install riprap waterway and 24-inch pipe next to an existing 12-inch pipe through my yard. Except for some yard incursions due to a check dam and lower south side berm, my water problems have been solved. The excess water from Hillcrest now causes issues with storm drainage on Blatchley Avenue and with open runoff going across Blatchley through the property at 130 Blatchley Avenue, close to the west side of Ruey Lane, through the Curtis open space, down to South End Road, and eventually into the Quinnipiac River. So obviously, I have stormwater concerns about any construction or land changes at 570 Meriden Avenue. I had a lot more to say tonight, but Steve and Tony did a good job addressing those questions. So I'll conclude by saying this. In a town such as Southington, where the amount of buildable land is becoming scarcer and scarcer, where property values have increased, where people love to live, I believe it's inevitable that this property will be developed. I had always hoped that this former farmland and huge animal and bird corridor would be open space, and even pursued that with the Open Space Committee, but that was not meant to be. No matter what the fate of this 9-acre plot of land is, please, as our town officials, do your best to consider, protect, respect the properties that surround or are near to it, the animals, birds, and trees that now thrive on it, the stormwater that flows through, around, and under it, and finally the existing topography. I look forward to hearing more information before a final decision zoning change is rendered. Thank you for your time and attention this evening and for your hard work on behalf of the people, the flora, the fauna, and the ultimate health of the town of Southington. So I support this with a little bit of reservation because of my history. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think it's fair to say that most of the concerns that you bring up, Ms. Hobson, would probably be addressed in a site plan application, which would be forthcoming if this is approved. But I think your comments are well placed, and I know that drainage has been an issue up in that area for some time, and our town engineering department has worked pretty diligently at that. But with that, are there any questions of Ms. Hobson from the members of the commission? Seeing none, is there anyone else who'd like to testify? No one. Nope.
I do have a picture of what my yard looked like in September of 2019.
Okay.
There's a lot of new members on the P&Z here, so I'm just going to pass these. There's 6 copies. You can share them.
Okay.
Have those.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience tonight who'd like to testify in favor of this application at this time? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to testify in opposition to this application?
How are you? My name is Joe Stablarek, 39 Blatchley Avenue. I'd be about the third one in on Blatchley Avenue from Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. Lived in the town for going on 28 years. So a couple of things just about this. Number one, we have zoning regulations for a reason. That was one of the reasons why that was originally zoned as R40, was to minimize residential the residential development and the impact on the town and the tax base that it had. So it was several years ago that we went through an entire process of looking at this. And so nobody said anything when they put in RUI at 1-acre zones. Unfortunately, we all know the history behind Hillcrest and how that's worked out. That being said, I would say this. I've lived in town long enough now I need glasses. It's a piece of private property. I mean, they're developing everything and have no qualms against a person developing private property. It is a business, so let's be honest, it's a business. And one of the reasons why we're standing up here talking about developing that is because, quite frankly, when you run the numbers, if you were to build 8 or 9 single-family homes on an acre, probably about 6 1/4, those homes would go for, something along those lines. It'd be about $5.6 million would be the total revenue on the top line of the project. But if you build 24 homes and charge $400,000 for them, it'd be $9.6 million. So, I mean, honestly, that's the reason. It's not about preservation of open space or anything like that. It's about how can we maximize the value of the homes. Okay, I've got that. I would say this, that it's his right to do that, and they own the land, good for them, and they can develop it according to the rules, and as long as they're the rules. My question is why do we have the rules? We have the rules because, number one, we're concerned about the development, the impact on residents. Number two, we're concerned that where my rights stop as a private property owner, they stop at where other people's rights begin. And although Mary Ellen said that she was concerned about it, I would say that there's some major concerns about it. It didn't work out last time when ultimately they built Hillcrest. It's caused significant issues on Blatchley Avenue and with some of the other homeowners. And I think that when I look at this and say, well, this thing is supposed to be private, and I do have a question about that. I'm not sure that that was answered correctly. Maybe they can come up and address that. They said that the road would be private, so I would imagine there'd be some type of an HOA. But if the road is private and the retention is private, I just think that, quite frankly, if this gets approved like this, that the remediation to guarantee that the people on Lower Blatchley Avenue don't have storm drain or rats and snakes escaping into their backyard like some of our neighbors have had coming out of the water. That's actually a true story. To not have that happen, the guarantee for that should be on the developer of the land. Plain and simple. They will have, if they get this, they will have the top line revenue to be able to do that, and they should guarantee that that is not the case. The second thing would be this. I would say this, that if that some accommodations, if we can't keep the land open, I get it. Barring that, it should eliminate any impact at the owner's private expense to the development of that land, up to and including the green barrier around the outside. I'll say that that doesn't do a great job of illustrating sightlines. And I'd say that when we were talking about the earlier thing with the pump house, plantings and things like that, one of the things is that the barrier should not just be left to the way it was, because quite frankly, the owner of the property previously was actually negligent in the way that they maintain the property. When I say that they were negligent maintaining the property, I'll give you 3 examples. Number one, when we first moved in, they actually cut a tree on their property, knocked it over into our property, broke part of our barrier in half, and just left. Actually came onto our property while we weren't there, cleaned up their mess, and left. And so part of our barrier is broken in half. Never did anything about it. We have trees that are overhanging that at our expense to keep the shed that's at the back of our property safe when their tree split. We, at our own expense, had to cut down part of their tree. There's all kinds of garbage trees like a sumac and stuff like that are growing up that we have to continually maintain. So what I would say is that if they're going to do that, the part of the development should not be to just say we're going to clear what we need to clear, but there should be some type of active barrier, meaning I'm going to be forced at my expense to put up a fence or put up arborvitae or something like that. Okay, that's on me. But if they're going to develop it, they should come in and, I don't know, plant some spruce or juniper or something along those lines to put up an active barrier for that. The other thing would be, that would be the one would be the overgrowth. 2, if you actually walk the place right now, there were shipping containers that are sitting there. There were old sheds that they allowed to collapse and have vermin inside of it and things like that. And so it hasn't been the greatest thing. So we've kept the barrier, but if they go and are going to develop it, we get it. My recommendation would be, say, it's R40 for a reason. Let them develop it, but let them develop it at R40 and see how it goes. If you're not going to do that, then they should be responsible for both the remediation to ensure that private property rights of the neighbors, especially on Lower Blatchley Avenue, and then some type of an active barrier. That'd be it.
Okay.
Questions?
Thanks, Joe. Any questions for members of the commission?
Cool.
Seeing none. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate your thoughts. Anyone else would like to testify in opposition to this application? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Mark Gittleton, 7 Old Oak Court, Hillcrest Village. Nice presentation. Answered a lot of my questions, but I have a couple that have come up also. Quite evident, it's been brought up, that it's a wildlife refuge there. As Hillcrest was before it became Hillcrest, drove a lot of those animals into that area there. If that area now disappears, where do they go? I too am concerned about the green area as to exactly what it would be. There's stands of old trees that are there. Some of them have fallen. Would the fallen ones be removed and leave the ones that are healthy there, or what? That type of a question. I have a question about, you mentioned that, it was mentioned that with 55 and older, that their entrances and exits are about 0.3 versus against the 1.0. But that's not taking into consideration family and friends that come to visit them, grandkids, and everything else that could be coming to visit them and out. you're slowing down to turn in. There have already been numerous close calls at Hillcrest Village where Hillcrest Drive intersects with 322, with people slowing down to make the turn. Just additional issues there. I'm concerned about the fact that there's only one entrance and one exit to the place. Hillcrest required 2, and that's why we ended up going through and connecting with Rui. Kiefer, I mean, thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm concerned about there only be one entrance and exit to the place. Let's see here. They claim that they're only going to put 24 units in, but they could put up to 38 units in. What's to prevent them, if they get approved for the arch, just saying, you know what, we're going to put in 32 instead of 24. What stops them? I mean, they're making their pitch here with 24 units. There's nothing to prevent them from changing that number as they move forward, as long as they don't exceed the 38 that would be allowed by law. So, and then they're going to have 2.3 acres of open space. It's currently 7.8 acres of open space, I think is what he said. So, we're losing 5.5 acres there of open space. Eventually it will be, but, if you make it the R40 and they build 8 or 9 homes there, they are on larger areas. Yes, residents can clear cut all the way back to the fence if they want to. But you have wider areas, more green space for lawns and things like that. And my last question then is, as a Hillcrest resident, being aware of the issues with that retention pond that was brought up, okay? Right now that water flows, I believe, over into that gully and across the property. So does that mean then that they're going to have to bring it underground to take it underneath there? Where across their property to get over to the other side? Will it connect with their existing their retention pond that they want to put in? Or will that retention pond be separate and our water would be separate? And since Hillcrest is, knock on wood, going to be completed this year, and the builder leaving, and we take over complete control of the HOA, all right, if there are water issues in the future as a result of this development going in, because I believe, ma'am, you said that this last storm there was no problem. It seemed the remediation that was done seemed to have fixed the issue. If the issue comes back, then could Hillcrest get pulled into it, and the HOA have to come up with funds to do additional remediation, which could be a very big ticket item. So those are the things that concern me, and the reason why I'm not putting in this unit. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I just want to address one thing you brought up.
Yes.
You asked a question about how are we going to prevent the number of units that ultimately go in there. What you see up there is a conceptual site plan. Effectively, it means nothing. They could come back and put the maximum amount. Mm-hmm. The say-so as to what number of units go in there, what they look like, how they're laid out, what the amount of green space is, and how that green space is laid out is this commission. We all, as I said at the beginning, this is a zone change. This is not a site plan hearing. If this were to pass and the zone change were to be made, then they would have to come back with a site plan, which we would then have the opportunity to act on. And that's where we start getting into those details about what does it look like, how is it laid out, what are the numbers of egress in and out of the property, what numbers should that be, all those sort of the details of what you're actually looking at. So that's not something the developer really can answer
at this point in time.
But I just want to make sure that you understand that that's where we're up here to make sure that if they tell us they're putting in 28 units, that they don't come in here a month from now, a year from now, 7 years from now and say, oh, we're going to put the 35 here now. We all have say over that.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, because I agree with the gentleman on Blatchley that I would prefer to see 9 than 24.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, Nick? Just 1 second, Mark.
Sir.
Commissioner Tedesco has a comment. Just give us 1 second. Go ahead.
I just said you don't have to come back up. I was just asking is more like a internal sort of thing. Would we add a contingency at this point for 24 units? No more.
No.
That would be
Later.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Go ahead, sir.
Larry DiPaolo, 106 Blatchley Avenue. First of all, I want to say that Southington is very strongly in favor of open space land. There's no question about it. We spend millions of dollars, and we just spent $5 million just for land rights on the golf course, not to develop the land. So now, and that was unanimously voted on by the town residents of Southington. So to me, that is a mandate to this board. That is what the people want. Okay. Now the taxpayers are paying over $25,000 a month to pay off that $5 million purchase of the land rights. So all of us in town are paying $25,000 a month taxes to pay off that land that we did not want developed. And I'm fully in favor of that because Southington is that way. So we, like he said, he could put in 38 houses. He could put 8 or 9 houses in there, like you said. He's got 8. We got to keep our 40 is our 40. Our 20 is what we got is what we got. The people of Southington want open space. Now, he made a statement that, well, we're going to give 2 acres of open space. Well, I did some quick numbers. That tells me that 23% of that land is open space. I don't see where 23% of that land is open space. It's only 8.7 acres, the whole thing. So how could we get 2 acres of open space in there? We're going to have open space between the people's houses? I don't understand.
It's green space.
Huh?
It's green space, not just the way the regulations.
Well, I mean, so what's the how do we call it open space? It's, we can't go in there. It's private road. So it's not private. If open space, like behind my house on Blatchley, we got 30-something acres, open space. People go up there, they walk through, and they do all that. That's open space. If that's a private development, that is no open space for me to use as a Southington resident. So the fact that he's given us 2 acres of open space, he's given us nothing. Because it's 2 open space, 2 acres of something that you can't use. So how does that come under open space? They use that to get...
I think the question or the comment is green space, which is really different than open space.
Well, he didn't use green space. He used open space.
He did. And it's on the plan. Around all that, it says green space.
Every place got green grass. Okay? I mean, my yard is all open space.
No, but the green space says that they can't build on it. A homeowner in lot number, pick a number, can't go back there and expand his lot. So it's open space, green space, not open space.
The way the rules read today, he could put 8 homes in there. Okay? That's
under an R40.
Under what it's zoned at today. Now, that house that's there existing, that road coming in, looks like, does there have to be some kind of space between the road and the property where the people, I mean, they have, if you look on the map, they have a dotted area all the way around. But if you, by the home that's existing there, it looks like just about enough room for a shrub in there, and the road is right up against that town's property. You don't have to have any kind of space around from the property, the house to that road?
I think that the developer will answer that. You presented a question, and I think he'll answer that in his response.
Yep,
okay.
Correct.
Okay, just a minute. Another thing is we're creating a very hazardous situation on the road condition up there. Between Blatchley Avenue and Hillcrest, all right, I can't see this. I can't read the space on this map, what it is, but there's almost 200 houses coming into Meriden Waterbury Road where the speed limit's 45 miles an hour, and each house, say, got 2 cars, so there's 400 cars going in and out in a very, very short distance. It can't be more than two 200, 250 feet, we got 100 and something houses coming out of Hillcrest. Then a couple of properties down, we got these 25. Then across the street, we got 7 more. And then across the street from that, we got Blatchley coming out with 55 houses. So there's a lot of traffic. And then just up the road from that, I got McKinsey, where everybody's coming out from that development into Merida Waterbury. So we got a lot of traffic that's coming into that area. But I say that we should keep it R40. We spent all this money on land rights not to be developed, but that doesn't give the builders that are coming in are like, we're giving them something away for free. I mean, we got people on West Street. We got on Merida Waterbury. Next week, we got somebody else coming up on Churchill. We got zoning. Let's leave it what it's at. And like he said, you could go in it. You don't have to have no hearings. Put your 8 houses in and go. I got nothing against doing what we got. But to compare Blatchley and Kiefer, those houses were pre-zoning. There was no zoning when those houses were built in. Down from the end of Blatchley, they put in Kiefer. They put in Ruey Lane. Those are all acre lots, and this was done 20 years ago. But they put a new development off of Blatchley, and it's all acre lots. And there's people in that area that have houses down acre lots. Why should we just take and put in? Well, I don't even know what the size of the lots are going to be. There's not going to be. It can't be a quarter of an acre. But we got R40. Let's leave it R40. I think this board has got to take a stand. We got R40 unless there's a real bad hardship. That's what we're keeping. No changes for anybody. I'm not going against them. I'm going to the whole town of Southington. Okay. That's why I'm here. I was here against the West Street, okay? And I don't live anywhere near West Street. I want to go for what's best for Southington. And by changing the rules, it looks like we're up like Rensselaer Field, passing out free food. All the builders are coming in there to get their free, make all their money. Like the other fellow said, they're going to make a lot more money because they can put a lot more houses. What does that do for me as a Southington resident? It does nothing for Southington. It does good for the builder, but it does nothing for anybody in Southington when they put in 20 houses, they go put 400 units over here. We're paying $5 million not to develop the land, and then we turn around and give everybody double. So that was stupid to pay for that because we didn't save anything because instead of putting in 8, they're putting in 24. Instead of putting 200, they're going to put in 400. Let's stay with what we got. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any questions for Mr. No. Come on. Seriously. Really, I mean, let's maintain decorum here. I read it in the beginning of the meeting. Any questions for Mr. DiPaolo? Seeing none. Anyone else would like to testify in opposition to this application? Going once? Come on up.
Yeah, sure.
Good evening. Andre Lubier, 27 Sultana Terrace. We're one of the streets that the developers didn't mention in their proposal or their presentation. I actually live directly across the street from where the property is going to be developed. When Hillcrest and have a lot of neighbors and friends through the development there, when they moved into that development and built that site, about 2 years into it, the actual road had to be lowered between 3 and 8 feet because of the site plan. When you come up the hill or over the hill, down the hill, you couldn't see the cars coming either way out of our driveway where Hillcrest is now or even out of Blatchley. So my question to the board is, have any of you walked the site that is proposed to be developed? Have you looked at the site plan for the streets in the surrounding area to see the property as well as the traffic? And then also, there are no sidewalks in that general area. My children come off the bus from middle school and elementary school and cross that main road. So with the development of this property, with the additional potentially 30 houses, that's even more traffic coming in during school period, during drop off. If you sit there in the morning and watch the school buses pick up the kids, it's a mess. It truly is a mess. There is people blowing by the school buses. There are people not realizing it's a stop. There's an area there for kids. So have any of you actually walked the site?
So we're not here to really answer questions like that right now. This is an opportunity for you to talk to us and give your impressions on the application.
Sure. So will you?
I'll tell you personally for myself, yes, I went out there. I didn't get out of my car and walk the site because I'd have to trespass in order to do that. But I did drive around the area a couple times to take a look at it from what I could see from the roadways that encircle that area. Yes.
Sure. Come at 7:45, 8 o'clock every morning. Park on Sultana there. You'll be able to see the traffic there, and probably about 3:40 in the afternoon as well when the kids are getting off the bus. You'll see the issues that we have with traffic. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else would like to testify in opposition to this application? Go once. Anybody? Is this ready for action, Mary Ellen?
Steve has to come back up.
Yeah, I know. I'm just wondering, is this ready for action or? Okay. Does the applicant want to come back up? We have a couple questions that I wrote down. I'm sure you were taking copious notes as well. So we'll work off of my list first, Steve, and then whatever you might have on there that you want to say. There was a question about your responsibility to maintain the green space there.
Yeah. So the green. So I wanted, if I could just answer that in a bigger response. What we're proposing is a common interest community. It's one parcel of land. It's developed similar to a condominium is what it would be. So there aren't specific building lots on this property. One entity would own the entire parcel and be responsible for the maintenance of that parcel. And the green space is not an open space per definition of your regulations. The green space is an area designed to preserve. And it's not designed for neighbors to come and walk on. It's designed to preserve trees and landscape. And if the owners of this property wanted to walk on it, then they could do so. So the green space, as proposed, would be part of the condominium documents and would be filed on the land records. That green space would be preserved through conservation easement. So our owners would be required to preserve that green space and to maintain that green space. If anything falls down or if there's anything dangerous, they would have to maintain it like any other common interest community does. So does that answer your question? And I think Tony wants to. Yeah.
Does Tony want to
Mind
add
if we
something?
double team a little bit? The other thing, I think the additional part of your question is the buffering. Yes, that will be maintained, but under your special permit requirement, and I think it's under this section, we have to either, our existing buffering has to be the existing tree line as supplemented by additional trees or vegetation as is determined at a later time. But that is in your regulations. So we do have to provide buffering.
Okay. Anyone have anything you want to talk about on that? Any commissioner? Go ahead.
So on that point, I think the gentleman made a great point in regards to the type of vegetation that's there. So if it's not, I hate to say the word nice vegetation, then it sounds like, one would want, as you said, supplemental or additional vegetation in order to provide a good buffer and all that kind of thing. That also tells me, and I thought that was a good conversation, that if other type of housing was be put there, that would be cleared because nobody would want that on their lot. Sounds like.
There's the vegetation out there, there's probably a combination. In Connecticut, we mostly have second and third generation growth. We don't have the good old hardwoods like we used to have. Well, actually, Connecticut was only 2% forested in the 1890s, believe it or not, because of the. Am I quoting something that you said?
Oh, sorry.
Whenever you say the historical perk up.
All right, but in the 1890s, the whole state was farmland. So everything was deforested. Now we have, I think it was like 65% forested. So we're way more forested. But the problem with deforestation is that we have a lot of junk trees. What I would suggest is at the time of special permit, if you want, we would be more than willing to accept as a stipulation that we could walk the property with Dave LaValle and whatever, and any areas that are in there or trees that have to be removed, we'd be more than happy to take them down, because that just creates a problem in the long run anyways. There are a lot of nice hardwoods in that area, especially, along the westerly side. Those should definitely, as best we can, be preserved. Those probably were, because most of the whatever activity took place on that property, probably farming or something, was on the northerly, say, half or 2/3. So the rear area does have some hardwoods, which we'll really have to look at preserving.
Yeah, and who would have? Because there's a lot of talk about responsibility.
Well, the initial responsibility you're going to put on us, because you're
then
going to put
life
on us.
happens.
We have to construct
Right.
it. We have to do whatever.
Right. After it's built, though,
If and when we ever relinquish control, then it would go to the association.
and it would be the association who
Correct.
would be responsible for remediating any issue between parties, right?
Right, which is exactly what we have, in the open space communities, that space that you've required on your other developments. And that's why we create associations, give them reserve funds, and fund them with enough money to take care of
To
that.
take care of that. So if there's a question about responsibility, that is how it go. During construction, it's you guys. Once it is built and you relinquish authority, it's the association that has responsibility to remediate any water or whatever it is.
Correct. And the thing about the water coming off of Hillcrest, what we have to do is we have to manage that existing condition. And right now, that existing condition is, well, not proper. There is a variety of issues there. Some of the, when I walked the Kiefer Blatchley property, some of those homes, I don't know what the builder was thinking about in those days, because you just don't construct that way. And then when you look at the Hillcrest, are there problems with which I guess there was a discrepancy in the computation of the stormwater and all that type of thing. Whatever it is, it's an existing condition. Now, unfortunately, we're stuck in the middle right now, and we've got a development that we have to take care of, and we have to ensure that downstream we can't make it any worse. And that's your requirement, and that's what we have to engineer on, and that's our discussion with Jim Grappone right off the hopper. The first thing is, you've got an issue there, and, we could see it. I saw it the first time I walked the property, that there is an issue there. So that will have to be addressed. And, obviously you're not going to approve any type of development in that area until staff gives it their blessing.
Right, correct.
Anyone? Jen?
Well, one of the comments was, what does this do for us, the neighborhood? So I'd like to address that, and I'll just go off of what you were just talking about. Is your intent to look at the water situation and try to improve it?
I go back to the days of Tony Tranquillo when he was the town engineer. And if you remember, you don't remember because you weren't born yet. When you went down Route 10 during a heavy rainstorm where the Autobot, Dunkin' Donuts is now with the auto place, they used to be flooded. Okay, and Tony Tranquillo, when he became town engineer, there was a requirement of Zyro. Obviously, that became a state statute, became in our regulations, and then all of a sudden, Tony's definition of Zyro was more than Zyro. And that's pretty much been the theory and the philosophy in Southington. That's why now when you go down Route 10, every single rainstorm, you don't see the flooding out on that road, because guys like me and other developers in town, we've had to overcompensate. So in this particular area, I know that we are going to have to overcompensate because of what was done upstream. Okay. Right now, Mary Ellen's property has a certain size pipe. We've got to make sure that that pipe handles all the drainage, that comes off that site. And whether we've discussing preliminarily certain ways of doing that, maybe we take that pipe and extend it onto our property so she doesn't have the headache anymore. Maybe we fix the swale going into it, but somehow we've got to make it where whatever that existing volume right now, meets the Zyra requirements. We realize that's got to get done in that area. And that's why we left such a big area to manage the stormwater.
And can we fix his broken barrier? Is that
I'm not sure what the broken barrier
is? That part of this?
But if not, we can supplement it with vegetation.
Supplement the vegetation.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an issue. But, the thing is, like you mentioned, what does this do for the area? Well, obviously, it's a lot quieter development. It's a lot less intrusive development. It's a development that meets the needs of the requirement of the area. It's a development that's more in tune with the development on Blatchley and Kiefer, because those are smaller homes, single family. They have more of an older population, and this would be that type of development. So it would provide the housing opportunity that Blatchley provides its residents, in that same type of affordable area. And it meets the, I know everybody says keep R40, but, you're looking at a bunch of different things. We enumerated the areas in the preamble that you look at. Does this meet the requirements where this is a good place for this? Is there this need in town? Does this have the adequate access? That the state is mandating the affordable housing, or they've mandated it, but they're coming down heavier on that. And this meets those needs. And so you've really got to weigh it. And, the decision is yours. We have no appeal from this. It's a zone change application. It's not a special permit. It's not anything. Whatever you decide goes. And so you've got to really weigh it and see if this is of benefit versus what the current zoning has now. The thing that we have, and what's really got me in the 90s and in the 1990s and the early 2000s is that Southington became ingrained that we had to have single family housing on large lots. And that from whether it's a developer standpoint, developers love that. They can make a lot of money on that. We can make a lot of money on single family houses. But for an environmental and for a town-wide theory, that's not a good policy. And every time somebody comes up, they want to protect what they have. And I understand that, but from the town's perspective and long term, what we really should be looking at is, again, smaller and more open space. You look at this and, one of the comments was, just, put it on the 1 acre lots. So we've got almost 10 acres of land out there, put it on the 1 acre lots. Well, we're talking about a total between house and garage of around 1,900 square feet of buildable footprint. If you go with a 1 acre development, you're going to probably average around 2,800 square feet. You're going to have probably, 3-car garage, so because the lots are going to be big enough, that's going to be another 600 square feet. Most people will say, well, gee, now I want to put in a pool. They've got their kids. You've got your impervious areas. So you're talking about, instead of 1,800, probably about almost 5,000 square feet of property, never mind extending it over. And that's the difference in the type of development that we're talking, the 55-year-old, versus the, regular housing for families. And we have that need. we have that need.
I just have one more. Can I just ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
And then just one more thing was traffic came up, and you did touch upon it. So the trade-off, because this is we're looking at the regulation or the change, the zone change, and that's to make it 55 and older. And the trade-off on traffic is
Well, the trade-off on traffic is that peak hour, you're talking about 30% less per unit. But in addition to that, I read that the peak hour out of this site is changed. Instead of the morning hours where it is, it's around 10 to 11, because the peak hour coming out of a site like this, they have a different peak hour. So it doesn't correspond with the peak hour of the property. So, you know, you're getting your traffic at a different point in time.
Okay. Thank you.
I have that. Well, I don't know if you want to, I made portions of this study that was given at the Institute of Traffic Engineers that went over senior housing. But again, you have a different peak hour coming out, and during peak hour, it's a lower volume. And overall, again, you have about 40% of the 40 to 50% of the traffic. Now, the other thing is that what you'll find is the same as any other development. What we find in our units is that probably 40% of our units right now that we again manage that are over 55 are just single people live in them, and that's for a variety of reasons. You know, the surviving spouse will move in, you know, and sell their homestead or you know, people die in place. But once they move into senior housing, there isn't a turnover. People tend to stay there for a long period of time.
Thank you.
I'll just add, I mean, if you look at the regulation 3-0915, that speaks pretty at length about buffers, landscaping. It goes to the extent of talking about sidewalks, public sidewalks, which were brought up earlier by somebody. The commission has pretty wide discretion about what they can require of a development under an art zone. I'm not sure that discretion necessarily applies to a situation where if it was an R40 and you went in and you did it that way. I think the other thing that I noted was if you look at the map, this is sort of an appendage of an R40 in the middle of an R12, R25 zone. And I think that part of that relates back to Hillcrest. That was probably an R40 and probably extended down to that part just before Blatchy. But it is an R40, and I think that again, if you look at the regulations, we have pretty wide discretion of what we can and can't require. I mean, up to the point of, you know, planting of certain trees and buffer zones and stone walls and you know, buffering between adjacent properties and that type of stuff. That, as I said at the beginning, is yet to come under a site plan review. That's not really what we're talking about right now, but I think it is something that's worth looking into for anyone who has a concern along those lines. You all set, Jen?
Yep.
Anyone else on the commission have any questions of the applicant? Nick?
I know that someone who asked a question, one of the residents that asked a question, alluded to a $400,000 price point. Did you guys discuss anything in terms of a price point during your presentation?
I mentioned it.
Okay.
You know, when I mentioned that the affordability end of it was about $290,000 for a 3-bedroom, and you know, the retail probably would be a little over 400.
Okay.
I did mention that.
Okay. Thank you.
You all set? Any other members of the commission have any questions of the applicant? Steve, anything?
I mean, there were a couple of comments that were brought up. I wanted to just, I know I don't want to get crazy off the rails here, but we keep hearing don't change the regulations. We're really not changing. This does fall in your regulations. I want to make it clear to the public that this is an avenue that your regulations permit. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. This has been done in other areas of town. We're just proposing to go in that direction. I think there was a question about traffic. Did it include family and friends? the traffic studies do include those types of numbers. We talked about the water, and that's something that we're going to have to deal with, and we will. We always go above and beyond when it comes to storm drainage, and I think we know we have a problem here, and we will do extra to make sure that we address the issues, and I'm sure that your staff will keep an eye on us, make sure that we do the right thing. As far as I mentioned that there's no lots here, it's one big piece. As regarding the driveway, we have a 75-foot frontage here where the driveway comes in. We tried to hug the driveway to the east side along the existing house just to give us more green space on the west side. So that's the reason the driveway's in that location. It's about 10 feet off the proposed property line for the existing house.
Plus, you're required a 75-foot frontage under the regulation.
Yep. The other thing was just the conversation about the road lowering at Sultana. When Sultana was a subdivision that my office had prepared, site distance was an issue there. It was always very tight, but when Hillcrest came in, one of the issues with Hillcrest was that they could not provide site distance there for their entrance. So the lowering of the road was something from day one that Hillcrest was going to have to do in order to provide adequate site distance for Hillcrest. And I hope that it improved Sultana's site distance along that way. As far as sidewalks go, we would be required, I think the regulation does call out sidewalks, interior sidewalks for this site, and I would have to provide 75 feet of sidewalk along the frontage as well. So those are the items that jumped out at me that I wanted to just address. Do you have any additional questions for me?
Commissioner Salke?
Steve, just a question, and I missed it. I know you talked about it. Was the parcel A?
Yes.
What's with parcel A? Are you doing anything with it? Is it a future?
No. The intent
just
was
another piece of property that.
No, it was to keep the house, separate from this development. Parcel A has an acre, it'll be 40,000 square feet is what we're proposing to cut it out separately, so the house can just stay as is. Okay. The pool stays, the garage stays. That was just the requirement for an R40 zone with this house. The other option would be to incorporate the house into this development. I mean, there would be a possibility of additional units if we did that, but we didn't think that was in the best interest of the property. The house is kind of stately and it's a nice piece of property, so we wanted to leave that separate, and I think the intent is to sell it separately.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. I just saw here. Any inland wetlands on this property?
So we did have a soil scientist walk the site. He determined that he did not believe there were inland wetlands on this property. He did find a piece at the bottom of the detention basin on the Hillcrest piece. We did send that report to Dave LaValle for review. And Dave, I know Dave walked the site last week. He pulled the report for Hillcrest. What they're calling it is a drainage gully. They did define an area. He hung flags where he felt the gully was. So we don't believe that an application to the Wetland Commission is necessary, but Dave LaValle will be the final say on that, and he'll decide if we need to do that or not.
Water bodies or water courses on this property?
No, sir.
100-year floodplain on this property?
Mary Ellen mentioned that her property is in a 100-year floodplain, and I have to take a look at that. If her 100-year flood comes onto this property, it would just be at the very, very bottom piece of it. I don't let's see, I don't know where my stuff is here.
I'll get to where I'm going here in a second.
Yeah, okay.
Any areas over a 30% slope?
No, sir.
Okay. Just to point out under 3-09.7.
I'm familiar with it.
Any of those areas that I just listed, you're only allowed to count as 50% against the density.
Yes, sir.
In those areas. So those kind of get subtracted, half of which would get subtracted from whatever the acre of the lot is. So I just want to get that on the record that
the only
and you answered them. So
yeah, the flood zone, I'll just double check that and make sure it doesn't come under a piece. But again, if it does, we will adjust the.
And I'm confident that if this was to move forward and we were to see a site plan that are able town engineer will be very adamant about drainage, as I personally will be as well, to make sure that that gets addressed and any problems either here or flowing through here be addressed adequately and sufficiently to not affect anyone else. So just sort of saying.
I believe you, yes.
Yeah, you do. Anything else from members of the commission?
I guess just, and I don't know if I'm ready to render a decision this evening, Mr. Chair, but in hearing this, we always have and I think the public makes great points in regards to keeping things the way they are and the like. I understand that. I'm weighing that versus what would be best for the residents near it. And back and forth with that, particularly people on the border, here, there's more opportunity to help those people at the border because I have green space, open space, we could do stuff, versus if it's in R40, whoever lives there could go right to the border and do whatever the heck they want. So I'm kind of weighing what's best for the town, regulations, and when I hear the folks who border things, how can we best help them as well? And in something like this provides an opportunity to do that. It also provides, now that I have an association, if something goes wrong, go see the association, versus I got individual homeowners, you got not a lot of recourse
right
to that. Because now where do you go? So I think there's a lot of moving parts to this to be considered as we kind of weigh it. So myself, Mr. Chair, I would prefer leaving the public hearing open for now to kind of weigh some stuff. I'm familiar with Blatchley. Good friend lived over there. Mom still does. So I'm very familiar with Blatchley Avenue, but I certainly would like to get another look at the site.
Well, in deference to you, Commissioner Santago, we will leave this public hearing open. Do you have anything?
Unless you guys want to close it. I mean, it's up to you guys.
We're fine leaving it open if you want.
Anything else to add before we move on to the next item?
No,
Steve?
I think we've covered our bases. And if anything comes up in the meantime, we will report
We're back
back.
here again on April 5th.
Yes.
The public hearing remains open. Commission members are reminded that they're not to have conversations outside of the public hearing. Members of the public, please don't approach commission members outside of the public hearing. And we'll see you in, I think it's 3 weeks, actually. So
Nice. A little break.
yeah.
Thank you for your time and consideration
Yeah,
tonight.
Thanks for your time, and I appreciate your indulgence in answering the question. So let's move on to item 8D, Anthony Palmieri, 2 lots re-subdivision application, 445 Lazy Lane in our 2025 zone, S1333. Is this you too, Steve? Yeah?
Yeah.
Trying to find the email. From the woman on 324, the Aquatic one.
I don't know what I did here.
3-week recess? Yeah, because of just how the calendar goes.
That's nice.
Is that official? Yes, twice a month.
Oh, yeah. Said that, yeah.
I get to fulfill my civic duty.
Mm.
No interruptions.
I'm gonna go with this. You guys can see that, right? This Adobe fights me every week.
Who wins?
We just had it. We just had it in full screen.
I know. I can't.
Hero.
I can't get it back.
Triangle.
Where's the triangle?
On the right.
Oh, see,
Nope.
I didn't touch anything. I swear.
That was the trapezoid.
Oh. Gotta have our math class.
There you go.
All right, start over. How's that? Okay, so I'm gonna
Yep.
close this.
Close that one. Yep. Close the other one.
There you go.
There you go, buddy.
Now I always went to view, and it would say full screen mode.
Yeah. Why doesn't it?
Not give me that option.
We just did it. How do we just do it?
I don't know.
If you guys can see it, we can
I'm good.
we can go forward like this. So what I have is before you is a 2-lot re-subdivision plan. This is at 445, 455 Lazy Lane. This application actually has a little history before it. It's a 1 acre parcel with an existing house. It's serviced by private septic and private well. And we actually proposed a subdivision for this in 2018, I believe. And we got to this point, and then Rob Phillips noticed that there was a regulation that required, this is an R2025 zone, a half-acre lot, but there was an obscure regulation that required any lots serviced by private water and septic had to be a minimum of 43,500 square feet, which we weren't sure the history of it and what happened, but we actually withdrew our application. We came back before this commission with a text change to change that regulation to allow this conforming to be a conforming lot, which does meet all the requirements and all the health department requirements for on-site sewage and well. And this commission did approve that. We just never resubmitted the application. The property changed hands in the meantime, and the owner was busy rehabbing the house, and now he's ready to move forward. So the plans have been sitting around for a while. We did submit them. We did get comments from staff. I'm pretty sure I got an email from Jim saying that he was all set. I'm not sure about where Mary Ellen stands on it, but we're proposing just one house to the west of the existing home. We're abutted by 84 in the back and Lazy Lane in the front. There's a house here, and this is undeveloped land in this area. The health department reviewed this, did soil testing out there, and the soils are suitable, and it's pretty straightforward. So if you have any questions for me,
Okay. Any
the
questions?
applicant is here as well.
Nothing? All right. Let's open it up to the
So
public.
that was easy. I get it.
Well, not yet.
Oh, that's right. I got to.
Are there any members of the public who wish to testify on this application, for or against? Going twice? All right. Steve?
Just a point of order. I just wanted to mention that this is a re-subdivision, and that's why we require a public hearing for this item. This lot was part of another subdivision that happened in the 60s after zoning was enabled. So it requires us to have a re-subdivision and a public hearing. That's why we're here in this capacity tonight.
Procedurally, right.
All right. Thank you. I'll get out of your way.
Thanks. Is there any reason to keep this public hearing open? No one has any objection to closing it? All right, we'll close the public hearing on that matter. Moving into the business meeting, item 9A, again, was withdrawn. I don't need a motion on that, but let's move on to 9B, the Southern Water Department special permit application for the construction of a new drinking water treatment building on an existing water treatment site in a residential neighborhood, including all associated utilities, minor grading, and addition of a process driveway. Proposed structure is to assist in the existing water treatment building to provide more water to residents. Property located at 177 Denham Place in an R80 zone, SPU 659. Any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. We approve SPU 659 with the stipulation that the applicant work with the engineering department on the buffer around that property, as we discussed as part of this meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'd like to second.
Mr. Tedesco with a second. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? Any questions? I'll just go on record and say that I like to provide more water to residents. So I appreciate that part, being part of the actual agenda item. But with that, Mary Ellen, could you call the roll, please?
And we learned a lot this evening about things we had no idea.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Tedesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe?
Yes.
Commissioner Clock?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilowski?
Yes.
Commissioner Santago?
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka?
Yes.
Chair Hammersley?
Hammersley's a yes. Motion passes 7-0. Item 9C, Southington Water Department site plan application for the installation of a new auxiliary water treatment building. Construction still exists of a new building, associated utilities, minor grading, new gravel driveway, and fencing to provide site protection. Property located at 177 Dunham Place in an R80 zone, SPR 1832. Did you get a presentation on this, or we already had it?
Yeah,
I think we had it as part of
We had it as part of the public hearing?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Any discussion on this? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. We approve SPR 1832 with the same stipulations as SPU 659.
All right, good job. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Tedesco, the tandem. Any discussion?
Your turn.
Seeing no discussion, Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Tedesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Orlowski?
Yes.
Commissioner Santago?
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka?
Yes.
Chair Hammersley?
Members is a yes, 7-0, motion passes. Congratulations. Thank you for providing more water to the residents of the town of Southington. Item 9D, we have an open public hearing on that, so we're going to have to table that. We don't need a motion on that, given the open public hearing? No? Okay. Item 9E, Anthony Palmieri, 2-lot re-subdivision application, 445 Lazy Lane in R 2025 zone, S1333. Any discussion? We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion. We approve S1333.
Motion, second.
Second.
Commissioner Orlowski with a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll just throw this out there. This piece of property was a piece of property that I looked at when I moved into Southington 20 years ago.
No kidding.
Oddly, so it was weird when I drove by. I was like, I remember that house. The house is kind of weird the way it's set up, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I know where this is.
Anyways, Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Tedesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Orlowski?
Yes.
Commissioner Santago?
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka?
Yes.
Chair Hammersley?
Hammersley is a yes. Motion passes 7-0. Good job. Congratulations. Item 10, any administrative items? Anything? We have a couple things sitting out there under upcoming public hearings and other applications. Lovely Development is coming back. That was an open space subdivision that we approved last year.
Yep.
Town of Southington is coming back. Pump stations fall under Public Works or Water Department?
Oh, that's Public Works. These are
Public Works?
sewer pumping stations.
Okay.
Sewer pump stations.
So
Okay.
we'll hear from you probably on those. too.
Yeah, we'll have,
forward to it.
our design engineers are tying bonds, so they'll probably be at a
Okay.
meeting.
All right.
So it's sewer. Okay, great.
And then we have another zone district boundary proposed change, so we'll look into that on West Street.
That's the driving range.
Oh, okay.
That's what that is.
Right.
1740 is the not the one on Lazy Lane, but the one on West Street. That's what
Got it.
that is.
Yep.
It's the one that goes downhill down the.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And then we got another ground mounted solar application. So we'll see that. Is there anything else anyone else wants to discuss?
Nope.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Commissioner Santago with a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Go.
I was waiting for Christina to make the motion.
I don't know why. I don't know if it's the time change, but y'all got lucky because I am not my usual.
You were, yeah.
I'm very tired.
Yeah.
Because-
What's up with that?
Because I didn't get that coffee before the meeting.